Welcome back, Jim Krempel from Arundel Office of Emergency Management to talk to us today about emergency preparedness for your small business. So turn it over to you, Jim.
Thank you. We're moving the speaker around. Can everybody on the Zoom call hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, very good. If not, I can sit down at the table if I need to. Again, welcome everybody. My name is Jim Krempel from the Anne Arundel County Office of Emergency Management, located up in Glen Burnie. We were here about 6 weeks ago giving a active shooter training course to a number of you. So thank you for those who are coming back. And we can also give that again in the future. So we're going to talk about small business and emergency preparedness. You can see there one of the buildings damaged of a small business during a hurricane. And their positive note, we will rebuild. And that's what we're trying to get you guys to do. So our office, again, is located in Glen Burnie, and what we make sure is that both the county government and the general public are prepared for any emergency, all hazards. We'll talk about those hazards in a second. We manage responses to the major emergencies and coordinate with county, state, and federal agencies and partnerships with other jurisdictions. So all the surrounding counties all work together with this, and then we work with the state. So those of you who have heard of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the state is the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, and we're the local county agency. We're all work together at that level, local, state, and federal. And we do this through, as you can see here, planning and operations, planning for any kind of contingencies and operations to respond to them, training and exercise and evaluation, communications and outreach, and that's my job as outreach coordinator, and then special projects that we do that the county executive, the governor, and others might ask us to do. We work with the entire community. We work with private business. We work with industry, like BGE, our 2 hospitals, for example. We work with community and civic associations, all kinds of faith-based organizations, both houses of worship and faith-based nonprofits, schools and volunteer organizations. We have about 100 volunteers that I run for the county. Anybody here know of anyone who wants to volunteer age 18 and up? Let me know.
Sometimes the same.
So don't work, can you just manually advance it?
Yes. Okay. Maybe I can.
There it is. So the emergency management cycle, this is what we do as an office, but this is what your business can do as well. It applies to individuals, to businesses, and to, of course, the government. The first thing we talk about is prevention. So ensure that human action does not, or at least can mitigate what happens in a disaster. So a good example for this is getting your vaccine before we get some kind of influenza or other virus. Or our nuclear power plants. We actually have 2 nuclear power plants bordering our county. Anybody know what they are? On the call, you can answer too. Calvert Cliffs to the south and Peach Bottom to the north, right on the Pennsylvania border. So they take extreme precautions, as one can imagine. And we do exercises with them all the time if something were to happen. Out of curiosity, we have a whole fixed nuclear plan that we do, but we're not in the plume zone for either of those. So you think about the radioactive clouds that come like Chernobyl, we're not in the zone for either of those. It might get into our environment, and that's a whole other thing, but we have to plan for that. And that's really the emphasis on prevention. Mitigation is looking at getting ahead of things. So learning from other disasters so we can get ahead in the future disaster. For this county, the focus is on flooding. We have a lot of low-lying areas, and flooding is our #1 hazard for the county. It causes the most deaths, the most damage. People think of winds or tornadoes or all of that. It's really flooding that does that. So we're mitigating that. We're elevating structures. We're trying to get people not to build in the same place again and again and again that keeps hit. Another good example of that is California and their earthquake prevention, how they've included that in all their building codes, and now they're building to standard. So that's mitigation. Preparedness is what we're doing today, learning about the hazards and preparing to respond to them. Response is what everybody thinks about. That's lights and sirens. That's the initial actions we take in immediate, during and immediately after an emergency. That's firefighting, it's life-saving, it's restoration of power, that sort of thing. And the recovery is things returning back to normal, or as we call it after the pandemic, the new normal. And those of us who were around at 9/11, 2001, I was at the Pentagon then, that's another new normal. And so there's a lot of thresholds there. It's always a new normal. It's not quite the same. So Nikki here from ServPro, you can't see her, specializes in recovery. It's what ServPro does. It's one great example of us teaming as a community because it's what your company does, literally.
Correct.
Next slide. Somebody's trying to get into it. So we talk about whole community preparedness, and you can see the definition from FEMA up there. But basically what we're trying to do is reach out to the entire community to meet not just governmental disaster needs, but all of our citizens' disaster needs, and in your case, all of your corporate disaster needs. Strengthen assets, institutes, and process to improve resilience, which is bouncing back, and positive outcomes, which is looking to the future. So at the end, we want to make sure that you're prepared for emergencies, that your coordinated response to them, you have one for your company or even yourself or your family. Remember that everything we talk about also applies to yourself and your family. And then we have resilience and a rapid recovery, return to normal again. And you can see on the side, no problem. You see on the side there, we have the public safety elements, police, fire, emergency medical, emergency management. You have public service, and then you have, of course, the private sector, which I've circled there, private business. So everyone works together, and we saw that in the pandemic tremendously. We had organizations, both commercial organizations and nonprofits that we didn't know existed that came out to help us during the pandemic, and still are, by the way. So we built for that, we can use for any other kind of disaster. Next slide. So this is your whole preparedness community. So of course, you sit in the center as the manager or a manager of what you're doing, and your clients come first, as they should be. And again, it could be a customer on a periodic basis, or it could be a long-term client. We don't distinguish between it. But first, you have to think about yourself. Why do you think about yourself first? Is that being selfish?
Like on an airplane, right?
Perfect example. They put those masks down and say, put them on yourself, even if you have a little baby next to you, because if something happens to you, you can't be of assistance to anybody, and somebody has to rescue you. Exactly. Then you take care of your family. Your family may be yourself and a cat, or maybe yourself and 10 people. But if you don't think and think about your family being safe, then you're not going to be able to concentrate on helping your business and your customers. So we always talk about, when we talk to public service agencies or medical people, we always talk about, because they're always focused on helping others. They don't think necessarily about their family. And then, of course, your friends and neighbors, you have that larger group there and your extended family. So for your company, it's your clients, your business, and its employees. They're equally part of all of this. And it doesn't make any difference if you have one employee or you have 500 employees. Government, don't rely on government. You'll be in trouble if you just rely on government. And nonprofits, if you work with nonprofits. And of course, I could say that would include volunteers that might assist you in something. And then we talk about supporting entities, your partners, your suppliers, your service providers, insurance, and volunteers. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's your whole community. That's the world you live in. Next slide. So why should you care? 25% of companies typically do not open again after disaster. If you're from Hyena in Hawaii, you know that nobody will open again. They're going to have to rebuild from the ground up. Los Angeles is facing a lot of that right now. Fortunately, it didn't hit straight on to Los Angeles. They got a lot of flooding, but still, they'll probably have a quarter of the businesses go under because of all of that. Next slide. So here's some planning assumptions. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I'd ask you to look at them now. And I'm going to give Kim a copy of this so everybody will have a PDF copy to look at. And again, you don't want to be Dilbert and have her run around pulling your hair out emergency. Nobody knows your business better than you do. Again, it doesn't make any difference if you're part of a large corporation or it's just you alone in a private business. You have to consider that something will go wrong. It's a certitude. And if those that don't know, you are being hacked. So we have a little computer cybersecurity. We have a whole cybersecurity presentation. We can give a whole different thing. But we're under attack, and you're under attack every minute of every day. Just look at the pings you get on your system. And then think about your competition being better prepared. So you always want a competitive edge, right? So emergency preparedness can give you a little bit of that competitive edge. And you can't afford not to have an emergency plan. Next slide. So we have two kinds of business preparedness planning. Emergency planning, that's reactive, that's reacting to an emergency. And then there's continuity plan, which is proactive, which is staying in business and bouncing back quickly. And that's what we're talking about there. And you can, again, look at the list there. The emergency plan is taking a what-if scenario for yourself and your company. And again, it makes no difference if you are a company of one or you have 500 employees working for you. So you have to think about all that. We're talking about how many have more than one facility they work at. Okay, so you have to take each facility into account. We'll talk about that. And you have to include not only your employees, assuming you have employees, but also their families into account, because as you have to worry about your family, they have to worry about theirs as well. And then we talk about then cyber attack procedures. We keep going over that, but that's the clear and present danger we have every day. And then where can you get external assistance when you need it? And we'll talk that a little bit too. The continuity plan looks for operations inside your business to continue at planned levels of disruption. So we'll guide you through a few check steps to look at your business and find out what you can tolerate. You plan for disruptions. If something happens, a tornado, a hurricane, the pandemic, you have to plan for that and what's acceptable to you. And then you look at critical functions, and we'll talk about risk analysis, have backup plans, and a lot of companies, again, whether you're small or large, don't think of succession plannings. Who takes over at all levels once the leader's gone or the next level or the next level? And you may have another organization from outside your local company, from corporate come in if you're part of corporate structure. And you have to think of partners, suppliers, and services. Just think about that a second. If we have a tornado hit, which we've had two in the last 2 years on South County, anybody from South County? So we had the tornado hit, and there were a lot of damaged houses and businesses, and they were all calling the same companies for resupply and repair. So it behooves you to have a great relationship with those companies that supply you and service you, so that they know you by name. Hey, this is Jim. I really need some help. And you know Joe on the other end. He's going to probably give you a little bit extra help than if you cold call. And I think you probably see that in Serpro all the time. Mm-hmm. Next slide. Can everybody on the call still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so you develop a facility emergency plan. Now think about this. You might actually work in a business, a building or an office, or you might work out of your own homes. How many here, I can't see everybody in the call, how many in the room have an office? Okay, and how many work out of their own home? Anybody? Yeah. Or both? Okay. So you have to consider that that's your area. So identify your hazards and create an emergency response team. That might be you if you're a one-person business, or it might be a group that you assign to do that. And you have to look at practice drills for each location that you might have. So everybody thinks of fire evacuations. For those, again, I can't see anybody on the call, but for those here that have more than yourself, have you ever done a fire evacuation for your buildings, for example?
Although it was it's a warehouse, two doors, first floor.
Okay.
So
Still,
very easy to do.
well, it looks easy, but you might need to practice that. You never know. But yes, good point. Anybody else have an office with multiple exits and entrances? So
We
it gets
do.
complicated after a while.
Yes.
There's someone on the call that does?
Yes, we do.
So everybody thinks of fire evacuation, but there's a lot of other kinds of drills that you need to consider in your planning. Medical emergency, that either a client or one of your employees has a medical emergency. Active shooters, which was our course that we gave about 6 weeks ago. We'll be glad to give it again. Storms, tornadoes, and earthquakes. Yes, we have an earthquake. We had one here in 2011. It's not high on the list of probabilities, but it could happen. We've had 2 tornadoes in the last 2 years. We're still in the height of hurricane season. Anybody here know how long hurricane season goes? What does it end?
End of October?
End of November.
I don't remember.
And we've had hurricanes in December before. And you say, well, hurricanes don't hit the county. Well, yes, we avoided 2 hurricanes. Sandy and Florence almost came up the Chesapeake and would have done horrible damage here. So Irene was the last one we had. Anybody from Annapolis, you know that Irene really hit us bad. And then you have to consider extended utility or infrastructure failure to include your IT system. And that's both external, like the power coming in from BGE, and internal to your own system. And again, it doesn't make a difference if you work alone. Your computer that you work on is your system, so you have to consider that as well. So we talk about shelter in place versus evacuation. Anybody on the call on the Zoom land here, can you tell me what shelter in place means? In your own words?
When there's an emergency, staying where you are and not leaving on purpose.
Exactly. To hunker down in the facility you're in. And that might be because there's a threat from an active shooter in the area. There may be hazardous materials we don't want you driving into, so we say shelter in place. And evacuation is actually the opposite. That means something is coming that might be hazardous to your health or your business, and you want to evacuate early and get out of its way. Best example of that would be a hurricane inbound. You make decisions of whether you want to stay or evacuate for that. And then we talk about lockdown and lockout. Lockout is where you lock your perimeters from somebody coming in, and lockdown where you lock each office if you have a multiple office building. So that's usually applied to active shooters, but it could be applied to other scenarios as well. So one is the perimeter, And now if you're in a building that's leased by another company, are you, sir?
I'm sorry?
Are you in a building that's leased by another company? You're leasing from another company?
Yeah.
Then you're reliant on the owner of that building to do that external security. And you have to make sure that they're prepared to do that. And you then will do the lockdown and the internal security of your own offices. Think about extended power outages. Anybody here have a generator system? Do you have one for Serpro?
Yes,
Okay, good. Is it a large, like a Generac system, or is it something small?
it's large.
And you have it serviced by a pro, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to talk about this when we're doing individual assistance. Some people have generators, but they're small generators, and they put them within 15% of a door or window, and of course that is another hazard, carbon monoxide poisoning. We have that all the time during emergencies, so we have to plan for that. Then if you have business partners, facilities are part of corporate, you have to think about mutual aid agreements. Now we do that between counties, so if we have a major fire, we can call on Howard County or Queen Anne's County to come and help us with that fire. That's done automatically. Build that into your plans to have somebody else to be your fallback, a business partner or a facility if you're part of a corporation, that if you have to leave your facility, you can move into their facility. Think about that. If it's just you, then maybe you want to move into another building. So be thinking about that sort of thing. And then have a crisis communications before, during, and after any kind of disaster. And disasters are whatever might happen to you and impact your company. When I'm thinking of disasters at the county level, I'm talking about hurricanes and tornadoes and active shooters and hazardous materials. But as you'll see in a second, there could be other smaller things that could be disastrous to your own company. So have multiple means of communication, telephone, internet, et cetera, et cetera. Some companies even have radios for their employees, and you have a radio system. Consider your employees and their families, because again, if their families are in trouble, they're not going to be providing for you and your company. And of course, you always consider your clients. And as mentioned before, partner suppliers, service providers, and I would add to that list your insurers. Know your insurer well, build a relationship for the same reason you do with your service providers. They're going to be hit by everybody, especially a large event like a hurricane. So if you know them and they know your name and they know your company, you might get a little preferential treatment a little faster. And of course, that shows on the slide an emergency evacuation plan. And the links I'll give you with these have a lot of references. You can go and get all the details on this. So if you want to take notes, you don't need to here. Next. And then train your employee. Again, whether you're a company of 1 or a company of 500, develop a company emergency plan, and then look at your continuity plan and declare specific roles for specific individuals. So there's no doubt and everybody has a role. The role might be just close the door behind yourself, or the role might be a leadership role where they've stuck in somebody's shoes. Train them for first aid, for cardiopulmonary resuscitation and AED. We have a new course called Stop the Bleed. Stop the Bleed became an active shooter. I mentioned it during active shooter. So there's people who get shot or have some kind of a serious injury with a laceration, and they bleed out between the time that happens and the time EMS gets there. Usually in this county, about 5 minutes. We are now training citizens to actually control bleeding. And when you take that course, we give you a tourniquet with all the training. Those 3 courses, first aid, CPR, and Stop the Bleed, are taught by our office as well. We can do that for free. You'll have our contact information. Just reach out and we can do that training for you. And then we have, as mentioned before, the CRAZE training, civilian response to active shooter events, that walks you through active shooter events, what they are, some examples, and then they talk about how you can control panic reactions, any emergency, and finally what you can do to actually mitigate the active shooter and save yourself and your employees. And then we always talk about individual and family preparedness, going back to protecting yourself and your family, but also your employees and their family. We have an entire briefing that we can do with that. That lasts about 30 minutes, and that would be for your employees. So if you ever had an employee group together, we can do that. We can also do it for civic associations, for churches, whatever. So if you're affiliated with something else and want to get your employees together, our pleasure to do that. This is all free.
This is specific to Anne Arundel County?
Correct.
Okay, are there other organizations, maybe in Howard, that could do the same?
Yes, so all counties have an emergency. So 23 counties and 3 municipalities. Can you name the 3 municipalities? What's the big one to our north? Baltimore, of course. What's the big one to our south? Annapolis. No, I'm talking about our county. When you get out of the state, what's the 3rd major municipality in the state? The most likely to be hit by a hurricane? Ocean City. So the state looks at 23 counties and 3 municipalities. Now, there's a lot of emergency managers in small groups. Bowie has an emergency manager, Laurel has an emergency manager, but the big ones. The answer is yes. All of the counties and municipalities, Baltimore City has one, and we're all linked together. We talk to each other all the time, and they have programs like this, and they can go out and do this kind of presentation for you, specific for that county. Now, the red book we gave you, the preparedness plan, while it's tailored to our county, has generic planning that you can do for wherever you might be. And in fact, if you can take it, it's online, so you can get another copy and send it. I sent it to my sister in Texas, and they're using it in their county now. So again, we try to make it as generic as possible. Next slide. We talk about doing a personal emergency kit. So you have an emergency kit, hopefully, that you'll build at home. That's in our individual family preparedness course. And it talks about the basic things you have you need at home, like food and water, first aid supplies, cell phone, that sort of thing, for your family. This is for you to have in your car and in your office. So I was very glad to have this at 9/11/2001 because we were down there for 24 hours. And as we were doing rescues and moving around, and we had most of this in there. We added face covering, exam gloves, of course, from the pandemic. But these are the basic things you need, nothing fancy. Probably the most important thing on this list is your cell phone and a charger, or a little, you know what a blister is, where you can actually plug the phone into and get 1 or 2 calls out of it. An emergency charge if you need that. That's probably the most important thing you have here. But again, common sense items. We've had several companies who actually built these for all of their employees. I know one company who built 35 of them, and all their employees have them with them. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it's a really good way to bolster the preparedness of your employees, and also it gives them a lot of confidence and an indication you really care. Again, you don't have, this shows a commercially purchased one. Mine is all built from scratch with stuff that I know and I like. With all the first aid kit and stuff goes what? Training. So just like we talked about first aid, we talked about fire extinguishers, get training on that, know how to use them, because the equipment without training is not that useful. Next slide. Now we talk about business continuity planning. So what you want to look at, and I'll go through this, is looking at the critical functions and processes your business do. It doesn't make any difference if you're alone or you're part of a large corporation. Look about critical assets. Number 1 being people, of course. Number 2 being things. And number 3, very important, being information, especially public-facing information. Look at interdependencies you have within your company. What thing relies on something else? So if one fails, what's the impact on something else in your business process, whatever that might be? And then look at alternate locations. We kind of touched on that before, both physical and virtual. You fail over to another location. It could be a friend's house. It could be another company. It could be a partner organization. It could be part of your corporation. And then do uninterrupted communications. So if you keep your business up, you've got to keep at least that data flowing and get back online as quickly as you can. Have a succession plan at all levels. How many here are companies of one? Anybody? How many here have more than 5 employees? Okay, so again,
We do.
you have to have a succession plan. Are there someone that call it do? More than 5
Yes.
employees?
Yes.
Okay. Again, if something happens to you, assuming you're a senior manager or owner, then who backs you up? And that goes all the way down the line. Everyone has somebody backing them up. In our office, we have 2 deep backup for everything. So we have people trained 2 levels down to take over any job. And that's a smart thing to do. And the most important thing of the business continuity plan is it highlights what you must have to survive as an entity and financially. And then you take a hard look at it, you call out those things you really don't need. If you go through one of these studies, you'll look at it and you'll find, wow, we do this all the time. Why do we do it? It really doesn't add any value to what we do. However, if we drop this piece, whatever it might be, it's going to be devastating to what we do. So we talk about continuity, that's minimizing interruptions to your business, resilience, that's bouncing back quickly, and recovery, short-term and long-term recovery. We're in the pandemic recovery. We've been in recovery now since the day it started. That's when you start recovery. So we've been 3.5 years of recovery, and we continue in recovery. I don't know if any of your businesses were hit by the pandemic. You might have had employee losses, and I'm not talking about deaths necessarily, but they may have quit or moved on. Certainly there was a lot of obviously trouble in school and kid learning and trying to do homeschooling versus the online schooling versus regular schooling. So this impact's still going today. Next slide. So you start business continuity planning. Again, I'm not a business major, I'm an emergency manager, but this makes common sense. First, identify the risks, then analyze the impact to your business, then create a strategy to answer that, and then test, train, and maintain that strategy as you go. Next slide. So where do you start? So take your business apart and identify those critical processes and those critical assets. What's your core mission? You might do many things in your company, but there has to be either a certain product or a certain service that you give that is your core mission. Look at the things you must do to stay in business, keep yourself afloat. And then what do your clients expect of your business? What is their minimum standard? So what's your minimum standard as a manager? What's your client minimum standard as the partaker in product or service? Next slide. Then look at what you need to perform the business processes, and it's a partial list there. We always talk with people. Start with yourself. Remember, that's not being selfish. If you, as the leader of the company, or the manager of the company, or the owner of the company, aren't there, then is the company going to go stay afloat? Then you look at the other things we have on the list here. And again, we've gone over a number of those. Again, don't forget your insurers. How many here know their insurer well? Should be all hands. If you don't, you may not be in a position, you may be a part of a large corporation where somebody else does that. But know your insurer. Again, they're going to be in high demand in a major emergency. Next slide. So across the top of this slide are the risks, some of the risks that can happen to your company, and for that matter, to your family or neighborhood. You can read those as well as I. The ones below are the ones we look at the county level. And when I say we, it's not just the Office of Emergency Management. We work with police and fire, public works, the health department, the entire multi-agencies we have in the county, and then the state agencies work with. We divide our hazards into man-made hazards and natural hazards. Natural, primarily weather. Man-made are either intentional, where somebody's doing an act either criminally or negligence, and then unintentional or technological. We've had almost everything done in this list. The only thing we have is had a nuclear blast, thank goodness. So you have to look at that, and we look at it, and you need to look at it too for your own company. So look at those things that could break you, and look at probability versus impact. So when we give this course to teenagers, we talk about zombie attacks. But we call it an ELE, extinction level event. It would basically take out humanity. But the probability of that happening is zero, unless you're a sci-fi fan, is zero, right? A fire, car accident, the probability is 100%, happens multiple times a day, but the impact is usually only to one family or the victims of the car accident, right? So look at that scale. So it'll always be very hot days during the summer. It's an absolute cinch. There may not be a hurricane for years. So again, impact versus probability. Apply that same calculus to your own company. Look at what you do and what that impact is and the probability of it happening. If it's something that is totally unlikely to happen, the dinosaurs start tromping through your warehouse, no, that's not going to happen. Your warehouse getting on fire, that's probably the thing you really need to think about. I'm only using example.
I'm sure.
All right, next slide. So once you've looked at the risk, then you assess them, take the hazards, and take them and look at the assets you have. So you're looking at the hazards, and then you're looking at the assets that are most important to you and looking at their vulnerabilities. Some of these things might not apply to you at all. And again, I'll give you a copy of this so you can actually think through all of this, plus a number of links that actually have documents you can look through and actually checklists you can look through. Next slide. And then you look at the impacts. So you've had hazards, you have those things that are critical to your operation, and then what's the impact? Some of the things that can happen. And you go through this, you look at what you can tolerate. What you can tolerate financially, what you can tolerate organizationally, what your customers can tolerate. All three are taken into account when you do this drill. That's called impact analysis. So you've gone through those three steps. Next slide. And then develop a business continuity plan. This comes from Insider Magazine. I'm not going to read through all of these, but these are, they got 100 CEOs together and came up with, if you had a continuity plan, what are the most important things you would consider in that plan? You can read this for a little bit. And again, I'll give you a copy of this. I'll also send you the Small Business Administration link for disaster preparedness, which has this in great detail. And you can literally go through line by line and compare what your company needs and build your plan. The bottom one is really important. Test, practice, and then adapt and adjust. So if you have a plan, go ahead and test your plan. Practice with your employees. What happens if, and try that. And then if it doesn't work, that's fine. That's why you're doing the practice. That's why when we do exercises, we always have failures, but we learn from the failures. Adjust your plan, change what you need to change, and test it again until you got it where you're comfortable with it, and keep going from there. Next slide. So to respond to emergency, you have to stay informed. So back on the back, I have this QR code. This QR code goes to something called Alert and Arundel. It's a warning system that we have that goes to your cell phones. It's in English, Spanish, and 20 other languages. So if your native language isn't there, when we had 250 Afghan refugees come in a couple of months ago, we asked a lady called and said, do you have alerts in Urdu? And the answer is yes, we do. So we're able to do that. So you know what our number 2 language is? Spanish, right? What's our number 3 language? Anybody guess? Anybody in the call guess? Number 3 language in the county? Korean, Hangul. And the next one beyond that is Chinese or Tagalog, the Philippine language. But we have a lot of languages now. We're a very diverse county right now, as you probably see in your customer base. So we can send you all that kind of information. This is managed by emergency management, police department, the fire department, public works, and the health department. Only those 5 public safety agencies. There's no spamming. We share nothing with anybody. It's strictly to our system. And we can get down to the neighborhood level. So if there is a power failure or a water failure or a lockdown for an active shooter, you'll know down to the neighborhood level. Now that's useful for you and your business, but it might be useful for your family. If your child goes to school in one area and they're locked down, you will know that. Now schools have their own system, but you get the idea. Or you may have a spouse or another business in another place that you work with. You'll know if they have an emergency. Again, that's what makes it different than the state system. The state system is called Wireless Emergency Alerts, WIA, and that's sent out. That's not by subscription like this. By the way, this is totally free. The state system is just pushed to the cell phone towers, and that's mostly amber and silver alerts. Anybody know the difference? Anybody on the call know what an amber alert is?
It's for older folks if they get lost. Oh no, amber's for children, sorry.
That's correct. Amber's for children that either are lost or kidnapped. And what's a silver?
Silver is the older folks, retired, you know.
Yeah.
Geriatric.
Yeah, I'm an older folk. I'm geriatric older folk, but actually there's a step beyond that. It's those that need assistance, that either have a access or functional need or some kind of mental impairment. Just because we're old doesn't necessarily mean we need help, but it's good to know it's there. That comes from the state. There's a couple of other alerts. There's a blue alert if a police officer's in trouble or has been killed, and there's a yellow alert if a police officer's been kidnapped. Those are never used, but they're there. It's actually part of the state system. So we send these to you. So in 2021, we had a tornado hit South County. Anybody on the call from South County or live in South County? So it went from south of Edgewater all the way straight through like a ruler through Edgewater up through Annapolis and stopped in Parole. And we had the Civil Air Patrol, which is one of our partners, fly a mission the next day of aerial photography. And it looked like God had taken a ruler and put it on the ground. So we could have our damage assessment teams out the next morning walking all that damage. There were some of the roads in housing areas and in business areas that one side of the street was undamaged, the other side of the street was destroyed. Anybody guess how many people were hurt during that? 150 buildings damaged or destroyed completely. How many people were hurt? Anybody on the call? Guess? 0. Not a single person, because most people had signed up for our alert system. Now, we don't use sirens in this county. Why don't we use sirens? Why don't you think we use sirens?
Because we don't have, I was gonna say the buildings for it to bounce off of, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's actually true. People don't,
County.
they don't hear them. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
we're a huge county, but people don't hear them. They're distracted by so many things in your car, in your office. You wouldn't hear them. And a siren tells you nothing. And this is a conundrum the emergency management in Hawaii had. He said that he didn't sound the sirens because people were used to being a tsunami warning and their instructions are to head for the hills away from the coast. And he was afraid they would go into the fire. I would respectfully disagree with him. People are smart. They're going to hear the siren go off. They're going to see the fire and they're going to get out of their beds and go to safety. But we don't use them at all. In some places like Fort Meade, they have something called Giant Voice. It's a siren with a speaker system with it, but our county is way too big. 522 square miles, 125 miles of coastline. That's way too big for that sort of stuff. Even Annapolis, which is much smaller and only has 35,000 people, doesn't use sirens. Now, you might hear a siren go off with a volunteer fire department. That's calling the volunteers in that local neighborhood in to the fire department, but we don't use them as a county, haven't for years. Instead, we use our alert and rental system. And then above all that, so we did the state level, where we did our level, alert and rental. Remember what the federal level is for that, for warning? You've heard it a million times. It's called the emergency alert system. It's Those are the unlocked tones. That opens the system up. What you want to listen for is the high-pitched tone afterward. That means it's an actual emergency and they're going to give you instructions. And it'll say, usually we get those for weather emergencies. the National Weather Service has declared a tornado watch for the area so-and-so till such and such a time. And so pay attention if you hear that high-pitched tone. Otherwise, it's just a test. So if you don't hear the tone, they'll say this is a test of the emergency broadcast system in cooperation with blah, 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 and it goes on, right? So again, those are a couple of things to do. That's 3 systems you can have. You can also have a NOAA weather radio in your company. So those are very inexpensive. They can be set to a code that only goes off when there's a weather emergency in the county. It also will pick up the emergency alert system broadcasts. So you put that in your corporate office or your private office, and you will know immediately through all those systems. And I will tell you with certitude, you will know 15 minutes faster than the local news and radio does. They have to go through vetting process. They have to get their meteorologist to look at things. They have to get it out on the air. Most of the time, the stuff's already past you. Any questions about that? Again, if you don't use the QR code, you can go to that site, and this is in your book, or you can call our number, 410-222-0600, something worth writing down. Because if you need anything, and you think of anything you might need, something we haven't covered here, or you want us to do a presentation for your employees or your families, call that number and we can do that for you, and we'll be happy to do that for you. Next slide. And we have a lot of social media. As you see, we've even changed the Twitter to the X. We don't know where Twitter's going, so we're apolitical about that, but we reach out through all the different kinds of social media. We don't necessarily put out warnings or we put out guidance there, proactive guidance during hurricane season, for example, or maybe guidance after emergency. We have a Trivia Tuesday where we challenge your abilities on our Facebook website, and we have a whole Spanish section for people who speak Spanish primarily. In the middle there is Pepper the Preparedness Puppy. So anybody who has kids, age 12 or below, Pepper is our mascot for emergency management. And she has YouTube videos and other videos that are aimed at young kids to teach them the basics of emergency management. And again, go back to take care of your family first. We want to teach kids the basics because we don't want them frightened in an emergency, and we want them to participate to save and help save the family, not to panic. And some of that makes sense, and Pepper is a fun way to do that. She's gotten very popular. Next slide. Almost finished. Here's a list of business resources. We start with our office. And that link is to an absolute brand new This Week website that just came up. So the same thing with the magnets. The magnets you got are only about a week old. So they've got all the latest numbers on. We call it Beyond 911. No, there's a Spanish one. You're welcome to that Spanish. There's the English one's the blue and red one. Our county police, they can do not only active shooter training as we can too, but they can do a crime prevention survey. Anybody on the call had a police crime prevention survey of their facility? Anybody out there have one? So if you call 410-222-SAFE or CPU at aacounty.org, CPU for Crime Prevention Unit, you can schedule a crime prevention walkthrough of your facility. And they will literally tell you where your vulnerabilities are and how you can address those vulnerabilities.
We've done that.
Was it a large facility?
It's the Anne Arundel County Food Bank. So they came through and did the assessment.
How long ago was that?
They did it about 6 months ago.
Oh, good, excellent. How long did it take to set up? If you had anything to do with it?
Yeah, I was there. It took maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to do a walkthrough and have them look at the facility, and then they sent their report in a couple of days.
That's excellent. That also, your insurer will generally appreciate that as well, as it's showing the due diligence next step. The Maryland Department of Emergency Management, MDEM, has something called a Private Sector Integration Program, PSIP. And you can go to that link. Again, I'll send this to you. You can go to that link, and you can actually join a business partnership. In a major emergency like a hurricane, they have something called a BOC, a Business Operations Center. They had a BOC open the entire time during the pandemic, that you can get peer information about other companies and the state and things like the Economic Development Council coming in and is giving assistance in emergencies. So this is kind of a networking. And then FEMA has a complete set of business resources, which is excellent. And for business, I think even better is the Small Business Administration. So you hear about declared emergencies. So if the county executive declares an emergency, you can go to the governor. The governor can declare a statewide emergency, and then we can ask for funds from FEMA. And FEMA can, through the president, say yes or no, and release those funds. Usually, the Small Business Administration will step up without being asked. So that's an ace in the hole for all of you. And sometimes they'll even insure private homes, depending on what it is. So again, those are all well worth looking into. And then last slide, I think. So what are your challenges? How can we help you? That's what it's all about. Do you have any questions? A lot of information, but I'm going to send you a PDF copy of all of this. You can go to the links and drill down. Anybody on the call have any questions or comments? Sure.
So she mentioned the food bank took about a half an hour for that survey.
Yes.
The food bank's probably like 10,000 square feet at least. I mean, that place is huge. Is a regular sized office like 10 minutes or?
It depends on what they see. If the regular side office is a jewelry store and you have multiple exits and entrance, they're going to take their time. If it's just an in and out office or maybe a warehouse like this gentleman has, maybe they'll look at barriers, they'll look at locks, they'll look at alarm systems, video cameras, that sort of thing, and give you suggestions. So yeah. And in fact, they've been out to the food bank more than once. The latest was 6 months ago. We gave them grace training and they did that. All of our banks, of course, get a hard look, as do our hospitals and such. Any other questions? It's a good question.
In the chat, they asked for the Howard County numbers. Do you have those readily accessible that we could send out to?
I will send them to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like
Jim
those.
will send them to me and we'll send them out to everybody after.
So we have and work with constantly Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard County, Prince George's County, Queen Anne's County, and Calvert County, all the counties surrounding us. They all have programs like this to some extent. Howard's is very good. Queen Anne's is kind of developmental, and Calvert, very rural, is not quite as developed as ours, except for nuclear. They have to obviously be totally on their toes with that. Baltimore Cities is good. Baltimore County is good. Anybody up north? Anybody in Baltimore County? All right, and the last thing on the handouts, and I'm going to give Kim a copy of the handouts for everybody that wasn't here today. We invite to our Emergency Preparedness Expo. That's in September 16th at Arundel Mills Mall. We'll have 40 different public safety and public service agencies there. You can talk to the professionals about anything you can imagine. There are also volunteer opportunities. If you have kids or grandkids, there's a lot of hands-on opportunities there. But it's a good time to learn about the threats that our county faces and how all these different agencies pull together. And we do all the time. In fact, while I'm speaking here, we've actually got back in our office, we have 27 agencies together planning for one specific event. So again, we have to plan for emergencies that are known. We have to plan for emergencies that are unknown with no warning, and we have to plan for events like the Renaissance Festival that might have an emergency. So imagine a tornado comes through the Renaissance Festival. So those are called events and then incidents. Any questions?
I have a question. Do you guys have like a free emergency ready plan where you can go into each business and help them?
If you go to the SBA site, Small Business Administration, they have that.
Okay, well, we
So does
do
FEMA.
that. ServPro, every ServPro provides that.
Okay.
So if anybody is interested, they can reach out to their local ServPro.
So that's a plug for ServPro, but that's a great example of community preparedness. So that's a company who specializes in that sort of stuff, and they are experts in recovery. Again, the county cannot endorse one company over another, but we do know ServPro very well, and they are experts in that. So again, you can use your resources. If so you have somebody in your organizations that's an attorney or an insurance agent, or especially a recovery agent, go ahead and lean on them, even a friend. So use all resources you have. We keep saying again and again, don't rely only on the government. You're in trouble if you do, right? Any other questions? Great questions, and thank you for your time. Yes, ma'am.
So you said flood is like the main
It's the
thing.
main hazard for this county.
How many people or businesses do you think have flood insurance, and what do insurance companies consider a flood?
Excellent question. Did you catch the question? How many businesses have flood insurance and what the insurance considers a flood? So most coverage, both commercial coverage and home coverage, does not cover floods. So you have to go into the National Flood Program, NFIP. And again, you have NFIP?
For my house.
Did you get it for there?
I'm sorry?
You got NFIP flood insurance?
Yeah. From the government.
National Flood Insurance Program, underwritten by the government. They just changed some of their assessment rules to make it a little more equitable. But don't rely on your private homeowner or even your business insurance to cover flooding. You have to go into NFIP. And again, it's pretty affordable.
I don't know about that.
Well,
And what is considered
depends.
flood?
It depends on where you are.
Flood water is considered any outside water that comes into. So you don't have to be near the bay or a lake or anything.
So we have
So you-
habitually, people who are habitually flooded, but she's exactly right. If you look at the fine print in the regulations, again, these are federal regulations. If you have a flooded backyard and it comes into your basement and destroys stuff in your basement, chances are they won't cover that unless you have the NFIP insurance. So again, word for the wise, glad you brought that up. And again, that's in the book and it's certainly in all the references. Any other questions?
Yes,
It's better
Angie
to be
was,
overinsured.
Angie was asking online what time the expo is on the 16th of September.
The expo is at Arundel Mills Mall at the Anne Arundel Community College on the northern part. So if you know where the movie theater is, it's just above that. It's in the parking lot. There's plenty of parking below it. It's from 10 to 2 on Saturday, the 16th of September. And we'll have all those 30 plus exhibitors there. Plus we'll have 3 food trucks. So if you just want to eat there, we'll have a nice fest tent. You can sit and relax. And we hope the weather's going to be as nice as it has been. We had about 1,000 people last year. We expected 1,500 to 2,000 this year. And then the next day, for anybody's interested, is the Korean Festival, Maryland Korean Festival. So you can hear the music that night because by 3 o'clock they start their music, and the next day is the Korean Festival. You can spend 2 good days at the mall there. Your question, sir?
I was just saying to say better to be overinsured than underinsured.
Absolutely correct. And know the limits of your insurance. We always talk about that. One of our very, very good preparedness partners is the Maryland Insurance Administration, MIA, and they have an entire disaster response group there. Anybody wants to talk to them, I'll be glad to give you their director is a lady named Joy Hatchett. She is a wonder, and she knows everything inside and out about both business insurance and private insurance. So if you ever want to reach out, that's another resource.
I mean, I've just purchased flood insurance and more than homeowners
Through
insurance.
INFIP,
Yeah, it's more than homeowners
Yeah.
insurance.
but it's for your company?
On the water, yeah. But it hasn't been, it's never been flooded, but it's what, 5 or 7 feet, something like that.
Because if you're outside of a flood zone, I think that's $2.
I'm out of the flood zone, but, you know. it's better
Scott
be
offered to help
overinsured.
anyone. We have an insurance agent on the call, Scott, so he offered to help if anybody has questions.
Excellent, excellent. Again, use your own resources. Chambers of Commerce have huge resources they don't sometimes realize they have. That's why you pull together. Thank you, Kim. Any other questions?
If you can share the flyer for the expo.
I will share the flyer. I'll share this presentation. It'll be in PDF format so you can get to the links. And I'll share, send me an email, remind me about Howard County.
Okay.
Any other counties? Anybody on the call, other counties you're interested in? Howard, yeah, we'll do Howard. Baltimore or Prince George's, anybody? Okay, yeah, we'll do Howard for you for sure. All right, if there's no other questions, I thank you for your time. Be prepared.
Good job.
Thank you, Jan.